stand by for action.
Thanks, Tony. My name is Dave Miller. I am the Unpleasant Blind Guy. By now, you've all heard quite enough about the memo and almost all the implications that it brings forward. I'm going to talk to you about another aspect of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Justice Department that you may not have heard very many other places. Let's begin with a story from a friend of the show, dated January the 25th, 2018, from WPVI-TV, Channel 6, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The title on this one, Trial Begins for Suspect Accused of Shooting Philadelphia Police Officer.
When you watch video of this police ambush, it is a miracle Philadelphia officer Jesse Hartnett survived. It was 2 years ago when a man just walked up to his patrol car and opened fire. Today, Officer Hartnett walked into a courtroom to watch that suspect's trial.
And speaking of that trial of Edward Archer, the defendant, he is charged with trying to kill Officer Hartnett back in January of 2016.
As opening arguments got underway, the injured officer was there, of course, to look the accused in the eye before proceedings started. Action News reporter Vernon Odom live outside the Criminal Justice Center in Center City with what happened. Vern.
Good evening, Monica, and to you, Rick. The wounded officer, Jesse Hartnett, is widely considered a hero in this town for the way he handled himself when he was ambushed in West Philadelphia late that night at 60th and Spruce 2 years ago. Today, as the trial opened, the lawyer for the accused gunman joined the chorus, calling Jesse Hartnett a hero. The first piece of government evidence today, surveillance video from 60th and Spruce late the night of January 7, 2016. The jury of 9 women, 3 men were spellbound as they watched suspect Edward Archer ambush Officer Jesse Hartnett, who was sitting at a stoplight. Police say that is Archer charging towards the driver, firing 13 times, hitting the officer 3 times in the left arm before fleeing on foot. Officer Hartnett gathered himself and jumped out of his car and shot Archer in the buttocks. Responding officers arrested Archer nearby. Officer Hartnett, who's undergone 11 surgeries in the wake of the incident, is at the courthouse, but not due to testify until next week. In court today, the jury watched as the sullen Archer, now 32, refused to enter a plea to the attempted murder and related charges he faces here. His response to each question, quote, "I don't plead to anyone but Allah." In earlier statements, according to police, Archer said he attacked Hartnett in support of ISIS. Police Commissioner Ross was in court for the opening statements.
This is a major trial that we're dealing with, and as it was stated inside, the attempted assassination of a Philadelphia police officer, not 2 days after I was sworn in, as a matter of fact. So obviously I will never forget it.
Rick, again, Officer Hartnett was in the courthouse today, but not in the courtroom. He's slated to testify early next week.
Now, as you all know, Islamic terrorist attacks of this sort are becoming more and more frequent in the United States of America. As I've proven time and again on this program, Islam is the root cause and prime mover for these attacks. Now, you would think that our Federal Bureau of Investigation would have undercover agents in mosques and be monitoring persons of interest across the United States of America. That, you would think, would be their primary activity when it comes to countering this sort of domestic terror. Well, that might have been the case in past years, but it's not anymore. Give a listen to this report, posted September the 16th, 2016, and updated October the 10th, 2016, from WXYZ-TV, Channel 7, Detroit, Michigan, with the title, Meet Bushra Alawi, a Muslim woman working in the FBI's Detroit office.
I get that initial look like, is this Bushra? Because of my visibly Muslim attire. It's not fair to draw conclusions based on the myths that have been showcased in media. I think that sometimes it's just a saturation of fear and hate that has plagued our nation and the world. I believe that I am a responsible representative of both communities of ethnic backgrounds and also law enforcement. There's over 36,000 FBI employees, and the vast majority of them do not carry a gun and a badge. I'm a social worker by trade. Always wanted to make an impact. I've always wanted to give back. I'm just another American Muslim who loves their country, and when duty says it's time to serve, they serve.
Yes, the new priority of the FBI. Not enforcement of our laws, not monitoring of domestic terrorists, but combating Islamophobia. And you get that from this report via Jan Rennie by Leo Holman of Front Page Mag, dated January the 31st, 2018, with the title, FBI Takes on Islamophobia, and the subhead, White Nationalism Seen as Bigger Threat Than Jihad Terror. 2 Michigan residents attended a quarterly Bridges meeting hosted by the Detroit office of the FBI recently that left them stunned by the blatant Islamist infiltration of the Bureau. Bridges is an FBI outreach program whose roots can be traced back to the initial years following the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The acronym stands for Building Respect in Diverse Groups to Enhance Sensitivity, and involves FBI-hosted workshops for law enforcement and various immigrant communities. And let me stop to say that we need to be real here, people. When they say immigrant communities, what they mean is Muslims, Mohammedans, followers of the ideology of Islam. The workshops have been held in Boston, Detroit, New York, Chicago, Houston, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and other cities. According to the FBI website, Bridges brings together members of diverse communities and state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies to discuss issues and concerns within their communities. In southeastern Michigan, those diverse communities include an array of Islamic migrant enclaves, both Shia and Sunni, as well as Coptic, Chaldean, and Assyrian Christians forced to flee their Middle Eastern homelands by the Islamic State and other jihadist groups. And I'll stop here to say, guys, that very likely the concerns of the Christians is not getting a whole lot of attention here. Let's keep going. The outreaches can sometimes go to bizarre lengths to demonstrate the FBI's respect for Islam. In St. Paul, for example, the FBI boasted in its October 7, 2014 edition of the Law Enforcement Bulletin that the local police department hosted its first halal cookout with the Somali Muslim community. Stopping again here, guys, to say that halal meat is produced by basically torturing animals to death, not quickly slaughtering them as is the case in other forms of meat preparation. We go on. The January 10th Bridges meeting in Michigan serves as a fresh reminder of how the FBI has made a concerted effort to divert the eyes of law enforcement officers away from Muslim communities as potential breeding grounds for terror and refocus attention on Islamophobic American citizens. The meeting, held at the Troy Police and Fire Training Center in Oakland County, an affluent suburb of Detroit, was described as painful to watch by 2 guests who attended. Dick Manasseri, an activist with Secure Michigan and a resident of Oakland County, was one of about 80 people present. He and a friend were able to get in by way of a guest invitation from the American Middle Eastern Christian Congress, a regular attendee, but he said there was no emphasis placed on the plight of persecuted Middle Eastern Christians now living in Oakland County. And I'll stop here to say that that backs up what I said before and move on. Instead, almost the entire hour-and-a-half meeting was spent focusing on Islamic religious and cultural practices and trying to debunk any derogatory information police officers may have about Islamic ideology. The FBI's point person for this task was Bushra Alawi, Remember her from the audio? A young female Muslim wearing a full head covering or hijab. Alawi served in the Army National Guard, and upon leaving the Guard in September of 2016, the FBI hired her to be its Community Outreach Specialist in Detroit. Now this part of the article bears repeating, folks. Alawi admitted in the WXYZ interview that her real mission at the FBI is not to ferret out tips and information useful in the apprehension of terrorists, but rather it is to, quote, combat Islamophobia, end quote. That just happens to be the same exact mission of the Muslim Brotherhood offshoot Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE, which has an entire division called the Department to Monitor and Combat Islamophobia. And while he did not attend on January the 10th, CARE's Michigan chapter head, Dawad Walid, has a standing invitation to the FBI's quarterly Bridges meetings in Metro Detroit. Alawi went to great lengths to dismiss any concerns about the phrase Allahu Akbar so frequently shouted during the commission of Islamic terrorist attacks. Allahu Akbar, she said, is, first, said by Muslims 85 times a day. Second, was said by Jews and Christians before Islam began. Third, would be used to celebrate the birth of a child or in the prayer of a sick person. And fourth, it's normal and not particularly associated with violent jihad. I'll stop to say, except when it's being said while committing violent jihad. And continue the article. She explained that jihad means, first, an inner struggle. For her, it's to not eat cheesecake. Second, higher jihad, inner struggle. Thirdly, lower jihad, to defend one's property. Now I'll stop to say, folks, that that's a very interesting one right there. Because you have to remember how Muslims interpret things. They interpret their property as whatever they can get hold of. That's in the Quran, people. Whatever they possess with their right hand is theirs, and they will defend it. To continue with the article, she mentioned that jihad was even a name taken by Christian men on occasion, and that there was an FBI employee of Palestinian descent whose name was Jihad. Philip Haney, a former Armed Customs and Border Protection officer who became a founding member of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003, was a member of the Advanced Targeting Team before retiring in July of 2015, said the FBI did not get to rolling out Bashra Alawi as an expert on terrorism overnight. It took years. When Haney tried to blow the whistle on Homeland Security ineptitude, he found himself investigated repeatedly before being exonerated and honorably discharged. She wouldn't have been given that platform under the old rules, Haney said of Alawi. These concessions to Islam have been developing for a long time. Haney said the campaign to sanitize Islam began right after 9/11 and was international in scope. I'll stop to say, people, just go back to some of my previous shows, and you'll be able to hear the lengths that, for instance, the government of the United Kingdom has gone to sanitize Islam, and to silence its own citizens from complaining about it. And we continue. Since at least 2005, combating Islamophobia on a global basis has been a top priority of the United Nations and the Muslim Brotherhood-dominated Organization of Islamic Cooperation, a 57-nation group of Muslim-majority nations that makes up the largest voting bloc at the UN. The OMC adopted its 10-year Strategic Action Plan to overcome Islamophobia in 2005, calling for nations to pass new laws, including deterrent punishments for those guilty of Islamophobia. This crime was described as any speech that counters the CIC's statement that Islam is the religion of moderation and tolerance. The 10-year plan served as the basis for the 2011 UN Human Rights Resolution 16/18, which encourages every nation in the world to pass hate speech laws making defamation of religion, sidebar, meaning definition of Islam, a crime. Many nations in Western Europe, including the UK, Germany, and Sweden, obliged, as did Canada, and passed hate speech laws geared towards punishing Islamophobia. And I'll stop here, folks, to say that, as you know now, their interpretation of Islamophobia can be widely interpreted and is being used on anyone who is out there telling the truth about Islam. Let me move on. It was also around this same time frame, 2010 to 2012, that lesson plans in public schools across the United States started incorporating large sections of Islam, emphasizing it is a religion of peace and tolerance. In 2013, the OIC opened an office in Brussels exclusively for the purpose of combating Islamophobia in Europe. Brussels, by the way, folks, is the capital of the European Union. To continue, in February 2017, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres cited Islamophobia as the fuel that ignites global terrorism. This UN focus on Islamophobia came during the peak offensives of ISIS, al-Nusra, and other jihadist groups in their genocide of Christian minorities in Iraq and Syria, exposing the global body's agenda as more concerned about speech deemed offensive to Muslims than beheadings, rapes, and mass murdering of Christians. One of the more crucial developments came in 2011, the same year the UN adopted Resolution 16/18, in the form of a letter sent by representatives of more than 50 Muslim organizations, many with ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, requesting that Obama's then Deputy National Security Advisor John Brennan remove all references to Islam from FBI training manuals that were deemed offensive to Muslims. They also requested that the FBI and DHS rid themselves of all biased experts, people like Haney, and immediately create an interagency task force to address the problem. Brennan and then FBI Chief Robert Mueller fell over like a stack of dominoes. They immediately set about purging the Bureau of its best and brightest terrorism experts and scrubbing training manuals to the delight of CARE and other offended Islamist organizations. Instead of true terrorism experts, police cadets would receive training from people like Bushra Alawi. Since most local police chiefs get instructions from the FBI Academy, the same drivel that now passes for training at the Bureau has filtered down to police departments and across the U.S. Other highlights from the Bridges meeting. Troy Mayor Dane Slater welcomed the meeting attendees to the most diverse city in Michigan. Troy Police Chief Gary Mayer, along with 4 of his senior officers, welcomed their federal counterparts from the FBI and witnessed the guidance provided by the FBI regarding the normalcy of Allahu Akbar and benevolent jihad. Praise was offered for the Obama-appointed former U.S. Attorney Barbara McCabe, who was fired by Trump. Examples offered of domestic terrorism repeatedly focused on white supremacist groups who are seen as more dangerous than Islamist terrorism, according to the teaching of the previous administration and the United Nations-endorsed Strong Cities Network. Mental health was injected as an explanation for violent activity per the Muslim Brotherhood playbook, and celebration of the long-standing civil rights partnership between the FBI and the Muslim community was marked with recognition awards. Everything was about welcoming, 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 Manasari said. It was terribly discouraging, including when they talked about domestic terrorism, and they kept coming back to white supremacism and how do you protect us from white nationalism. Stunning. To counter the watered-down message coming from the FBI, Manasari said he has co-founded a project called Sharia Crime Stoppers with a retired police chief. In order to honor their oath, local law enforcement must demand expert Sharia training, he said, adding that the Sharia Crime Stoppers training is free except for travel costs. Now that was a brilliant article, people, and what it did was give proof to the statements I made before. Though we'd like to think that our Federal Bureau of Investigation and our Justice Department were parts of a team protecting us from Islamic terrorism and terrorism of all kinds, their new focus, thanks to influence from the Obama administration and the United Nations, is now on white supremacy, what I've come to call the global warming of law enforcement. In other words, while white supremacy may be out there among some few sad race bigots, it isn't nearly the problem that it's being made out to be. And in fact, it's being used as something to redirect people's attention away from Islamic terrorism, which seems to occur on a weekly or even daily basis in the United States of America. Along with the other problems with corruption that the Federal Bureau of Investigation has, it also now seems to be involved in direct cooperation with Muslims to deceive the American people into thinking that Islam is something that it is not. Now, what can I possibly have to back this up with? Well, I got the following, and so can you, from thereligionofpeace.com in their page about lying as a tool used in the ideology of Islam. Though there are many examples on this page of scripture and quote-unquote holy Islamic writings used to justify deception in Islam, I'm going to give you just a few. From the Quran, 66:2. Allah has already ordained for you the dissolution of your oaths. From the Quran 40:28. A man is introduced as a believer, but one who had to hide his faith among those who are not believers. Quran 2:255. Allah will not call you to account for thoughtlessness in your oaths, but for the intention in your hearts. Now there are a few kinds of deception in Islam that have been used since its inception and are still being used today. There's taqiyya, the one you've probably heard the most about, saying something that isn't true as it relates to the Muslim identity. There's kitman, which is lying by omission. An example would be when Muslim apologists quote only a fragment of verse 532 of the Quran, that if anyone kills, it shall be as if he had killed all mankind, while neglecting to mention that the rest of the verse and the next mandate murder in undefined cases of corruption and mischief. There's tawriya, which is intentionally creating a false impression. Sounds a lot like what Ms. Alawi was doing, and yes, even doing it in front of school children. That's in the video, folks, if you go to it and take a look. And then there's maruna, blending in by setting aside some practices of Islam or Sharia in order to advance others. Though not called taqiyya by name, Muhammad clearly used deception when he signed a 10-year treaty with the Meccans known as Hudaybiyah, which allowed him access to the city while he secretly prepared his own forces for a takeover. The unsuspecting residents were conquered in easy fashion after he broke the treaty 2 years later, some of the people in the city who had trusted him at his word were executed. And that's it, guys. That is a clear aspect of Islam, laid out in their own quote-unquote holy writings, that the FBI and the Justice Department should have been aware of. If I can find these things out as an unpaid volunteer, these are things that these professionals should already know by rote. And yet, in the name of political correctness, this knowledge is being thrown out and the safety of the American people compromised by the very same people who are now being scrutinized for both the illegal monitoring of American citizens and illegal tampering with our election process. A chilling aspect of the shadow government that not a lot of other people are talking about. Let's get into a story via Jan Rennie from Creeping Sharia, dated January the 29th, 2018, with the headline, UTT releases video revealing the senior FBI execs defending terrorists. The video begins by showing that the founders, imams, presidents, board members, and funders of Dar al-Hijra are linked to Al-Qaeda and Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. The video then cuts to then FBI Assistant Director for the Washington, D.C. field office, lauding the terrorist mosque and its leaders. One of the jihadi imams, Johari Abdul Malik, goes on to tell the story of how FBI Director Robert Mueller called him on his phone directly in the wake of the arrest of a Muslim who was going to attack the U.S. Capitol to tell him that he, FBI Director Mueller, knew that the Dar al-Hijra has nothing to do with violence. Now you can find this video by understanding the threat, published on January the 25th of 2018, with the title FBI Leaders Aiding and Abetting Terrorists on YouTube, but I'll play part of it here.
Today, I stand here with federal and local law enforcement from Fairfax County, Arlington County, and from the FBI's Washington field office. I want to introduce Mr. Paul Abate. He is soon to be Executive Assistant Director at the FBI headquarters downtown, and currently the Director in charge at the FBI Washington field office. He wanted to offer a few words of support for our community. Give him a round of applause, please.
Thank you, Colin, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everyone, and I want to say, first and foremost, it's an honor and a privilege to be invited and to join you here today. Imam Johari is a hard, challenging act to follow. Wow. I get more than 3 minutes, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
I feel like
if people start walking away, you know what happened.
I feel like it's a competition here. I have two messages for you today. Right. The first is about outreach and partnership. I cannot tell you how grateful we are, Imam, for the partnership that we share with you for many years here. Diversity and inclusion, that's the second part of my message. Again, we've really lifted up, we've increased the outreach that we are doing from our office alongside our partners in law enforcement. And this relationship is a reflection of that. We're doing a lot of hiring in the FBI now, and we need you. We need your help. We have many jobs, and again, it's essential, I think. We have a long way to go in terms of diversifying our workforce and our employees, but the only way that we can best serve everyone is to reflect the communities that we serve, and we need your help in that regard, so I reach out to all of you for that as well.
I'm going to interrupt you, so give you some more time. Let me tell you something that happened. I don't know if many of you remember, how long ago was it when McJunkin was there?
That was about 3-4 years.
3-4 years ago, I had dinner with the head of the Washington field office, and a few days later, I got a call from Abigail, I got a call from the Washington Post, asking me, did I hear what happened? I said, what? They said there's a guy who was on his way to blow up the Capitol, and he had weapons, and he's supposed to be a Muslim. I said, no, I don't know anything about it. He said, where are you? I said, I'm in the Capitol. Then I got a call from the director of the FBI saying, Imam, we arrested a guy. He prayed Fajr. He prayed Fajr at Dar Hijra that morning. And they arrested him later on his way with the vest and the thing on his way to the Capitol. The chief said, guess what, Imam? He was not being taught that in your masjid. We know that. I said, well, Chief, I would appreciate it if in the press conference you would say that, right? He said, I'll be glad to say in the press conference that this guy that we caught was not a part of the Dar Hijra community. That's huge. How did it happen? Because of a relationship we had. Can you imagine if the director had said, we caught a guy, he prayed Fajr at Dar Hijra, and we caught him on his way to blow up the Capitol, and he didn't say anything else? What do you think it would be like living here? He said, Imam, I know you, I know this community, and that guy, he wasn't radicalized by you. That's the power of our relationship. You can give him a hand.
Just thank you.
I got one more because I learned in the meetings with them, maybe something you don't know, but you think it. What group in America is the most armed and dangerous? Huh? Militias, right? Aryan Brotherhood, neo-Nazis. And they're out to get them. If you see something, Bismillah.
See, I knew I couldn't win this competition. There was no way. I yield, Imam. Thank you.
Now, as you hear from that people, a then FBI Assistant Director for the Washington, D.C. field office, yucking it up with Islamic leaders connected to terrorist organizations. And Robert Mueller, the self-same Clinton-connected leftist now engaged in a falsely begun fishing expedition against a sitting American president, involved up to his neck. The corruption is clear from the leadership of the FBI. But the FBI aren't the only ones who are being subverted by the shadow government to promote Islam. This is a story that I covered in a brief show, and I'm going to touch on it here because it's important. It's by Katie Metler of the Washington Post, and it was published on May the 31st, 2017, with the headline, "A New Jersey town denied Muslims a mosque. Now it must pay them $3.25 million. I'll just read the pertinent part of this article. 2 paragraphs. As part of a settlement of the suits, the township must allow construction of the mosque to begin at its original proposed location according to the Justice Department. Bernards Township will now pay the Islamic Society $1.5 million in damages and $1.75 million in attorney fees, and require town officials to submit to diversity and inclusion training. Municipalities around the country should pay close attention to what happened in Bernards Township, Aldi A. Mengi, lead counsel for the mosque, told My Central Jersey. The American Muslim community has the legal resources, the allies, and the determination to stand up for its constitutional rights in court, and will do so. And who are their allies? The Justice Department, even under President Trump, and the FBI. Now, if you're a progressive leftist, you may be listening to this and going, good. The FBI is finally doing something worthwhile, going after these evil righties and race bigots. And don't get me wrong, I'm against terrorism regardless of who does it. Show me some white nationalists that are instigating terrorism And I'll be right there cheering agencies on as they take them down. But they're not there. As I said, white supremacists today are down to a few sad race bigots, yes, that are out there in their little militias and they have their little training camps and things of that nature, but they're not the ones committing the terrorist attacks. Those are being almost exclusively committed by followers of the Islamic ideology. But you still don't believe me, you say. If you're a progressive leftist, you think that somehow you are immune. Well, if all of the gays being hung from cranes isn't enough to convince you, try this. This is via Tanya Groth, who I interviewed a few weeks ago, of For Freedom, and it's a story by Jim Holt of the Gateway Pundit, dated February the 4th, 2018. The headline for this one is Swedish Politician Who Fought for Equality and Open Borders is Beheaded in Congo. Reading part of the story. Zaida Catalan was a Swedish Green Party politician who believed in open borders. Zaida was pro-immigration and supported migrant rights. She was the former leader of the Young Greens of Sweden. In March of 2017, Zaida Catalan was beheaded in Congo. And I'm going to play an audio for you as part of a video published by France 24 English on April the 24th, 2017, with the title, DR Congo Releases Footage Allegedly Showing Execution of UN Investigators.
Thanks very much for joining us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, the UN says it's horrified by footage screened by the Congolese government reportedly showing rebels executing 2 investigators in Kasai province last month. Also, in Cameroon, a military court sentences RFI radio journalist Ahmed Abba to 10 years in prison on charges of non-denunciation of terrorism. His lawyers are planning on appealing. DR Congo's claim that a video it's shown to reporters in Kinshasa is proof that its forces were not behind the murder of 2 UN investigators. The Congolese government screened the footage on Monday, saying that it showed members of the militia from the Kasai province killing Michael Sharp, US citizen, and Swedish national Zaida Catalan. They went missing in March after having been sent to Kasai to look into reports of abuses committed by both soldiers and rebels during a bloody local insurgency. Our Thomas Nicolon saw the footage.
No cameras were allowed at the Ministry of Communications on Monday. The authorities showed 2 videos to the press. In the first one, a man and a woman who seemed to be Michael Sharp and Zaida Catalan, the 2 UN experts who got killed in DR Congo last month, are being shot dead right before a teenager cuts off the woman's head. In the second video, 39 police officers are being killed. According to the authorities, these videos are the proof that the Cameroon Sapu militia is responsible for the UN expert's death and the police officer's death. The government spokesman Lambert Mende declared that the Cameroon Sapu militia is a terrorist group that needs to be eradicated. More than 100 people have died in clashes between Cameroon Sapu militias and the authorities in the Kasai Central province since September 2016.
Thomas Nicolon there for us. Well, in Cameroon, a military court sentenced a journalist from France 24's sister radio station, RFI, to 10 years in prison on charges of non-denunciation of terrorism and laundering of the proceeds of terrorist acts. Ahmed Abba works for RFI's Hausa service and was jailed in July 2015 for his reporting on regional extremist group Boko Haram. His lawyers say that no proof of the charges was ever supplied and that they will be appealing the conviction. Rights groups have slammed a reportedly increasingly repressive climate for press freedoms in Cameroon, and RFI has vowed to do all it can to get the charges against Abba dropped.
I'm disappointed, but I remain hopeful. We are appealing. No evidence against Ahmed Abba was brought to this court. So no evidence will be brought to the Court of Appeal. That's why I remain hopeful. But we do regret this new delay which means Ahmed Abba will spend yet more time in prison.
Qui fera qu'Ahmed Abba passera encore du temps en prison.
And there you are. Even if you are a non-Muslim proponent of Muslim rights and are absolutely for the importation of migrants into the United States of America, trust me when I say you're on the list of victims too. You'll just be one of the last ones. People, it's become glaringly obvious over the past weeks that the United States Justice Department needs the official equivalent of an enema. Its leadership has become corrupt, and who knows how far down the food chain this has gone. I urge President Trump to take action while there is still time to ensure the name Department of Justice doesn't become a joke. As for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, one of the original reasons why it was established was so that it could enforce laws across state lines. There are other agencies that can do that now. Who knows? It's very possible that the FBI could be in that old position of idle hands being the devil's workshop. Whatever the situation, it has become an agency that is corrupted not only to the purposes of the shadow government, but to the purposes of those who would destroy our Bill of Rights, our Constitution, and the very culture that makes the United States of America the beacon light of freedom of the world. At this point, regardless of the fact that there are still some good people left in the FBI, I see no practical thing that we can do other than to defund the agency and disband it. Now, folks, you can find references to all the materials that I've used in this program on social media. I'm at UBG Contact on Twitter. I'm also Dave Milner on Facebook, the Tea Party Community and Connect with Liberty, and a Magador on Gab. Now, after all that, I think it's time for an Awesome American segment. That's right. And this time's Awesome American is an anonymous man in Wilbraham, Massachusetts. Here's a story published by Ciara Speller and Barry Krieger and updated January the 13th, 2018 from WWLP-TV, Channel 22, Springfield, Massachusetts. Headline: Wilbraham police want to identify citizen who helped with violent arrest. Wilbraham police said a passerby may have saved an officer's life. Wilbraham, Mass., WWLP. Wilbraham police would like to know the name of the man who helped officers arrest a violent suspect who had an officer in a chokehold Friday. Police said that brave stranger may possibly have saved an officer's life. According to the Wilbraham Police Department Facebook page, Officer Joe Brewer stopped Derek D'Alessio of Wilbraham on Old Boston Road for a motor vehicle infraction around 7:20 p.m. on Friday. A Wilbraham drug recognition officer was called to the traffic stop, and he determined that D'Alessio was under the influence of alcohol and drugs. According to the report, when Officer Brewer tried to place D'Alessio in custody, D'Alessio struggled violently. The report goes on to say that D'Alessio placed an officer in a headlock and he was unable to breathe. A second officer struck the suspect with a baton several times with little to no effect. At this time, a citizen stopped and jumped from his vehicle and placed Mr. D'Alessio in a headlock, allowing the officer in a headlock to assist with the arrest, according to the Wilbraham police report. The report goes on to say, WPD sends a huge thank you to this unnamed party who potentially stopped what could have transpired into a fatal encounter. WPD would appreciate it if you could make yourself known to us. However, understand and respect your wishes to remain anonymous. D'Alessio is being charged with an OUI second offense, alcohol OUI second offense, assault and battery on 2 police officers, resisting arrest, failure to submit to police, strangulation, drug possession, negligent operation and failure to display an inspection sticker. DeLacio is expected to be arraigned on those charges Tuesday. Now, folks, those are some of my favorites. People who don't need the limelight, but just step in and help when they're needed. Oftentimes, they are the ultimate in awesome Americans. And that's it for this time, people. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you for listening, and may your God go with you. Goodbye.
The Unpleasant Blind Guy is copyright 2018. Anno Domini.